Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new stream, and today we are going to be ranking every single Cuphead boss, and the DLC boss, and the running gun levels. I've actually never done something like this before. Yeah, all 100 and something bosses. Alright, without further ado, let's get started. Now, we'll start with the easiest. We'll start with probably the first boss you'll ever see, the Root Pack. Now, let's all be honest, the Root Pack is the easiest boss in the game. But we're gonna rank these based off face, not just one single, not just the Root Pack. It's just like South Sputter, the Onion, and the Carrot. We rank all the bosses based on the faces. Now, South Sputter, I mean, once you really get to know it, the patterns are like unbelievably easy. And same thing with the Onion, like I can do it with my eyes closed. Now with the Carrot, you know, it's like slightly harder, but like, you know, not like by much. So yeah, the Root Pack is the easiest boss in the game in my opinion. And we're gonna do these by like order, like probably ones you're gonna see first. So we're gonna start with ranking like all the IL-1 bosses. Next we have Goopy Legrande. Now Goopy I had a hard time with when I first started out, but like it's harder than the Root Pack, but not by much, so E. Now it's just the same thing. Now the second phase is just the same thing as the first phase, except he just gets bigger. So I'd say it's harder than the first. And now we have the last phase, the Gravestone phase, where we literally kill him. Now, I mean, this isn't terrible. I feel like it's in the middle. I feel like that seems right. Alright, next boss is probably gonna be Ribby and Croaks. Alright, first phase is, honestly, the fist part took me a long time to get used to, but once you really get to know it, it's really easy. So probably a C. The second phase is I also had a hard time with, but like once you really get to know it, it's really easy. Definitely harder than the first one though. Now, the slot machine phase though, this is definitely the hardest phase. I had to struggle with this for a long time. You know what? Let's move this to D. And then let's do that. But yeah, the third phase is definitely the hardest phase in my opinion. Alright, next boss is gonna be... Okay, I think Hildeberg is next. Alright. Now, where is Hildeberg? Alright, Hildeberg, you know, her first phase isn't too bad. She really only has like 2 attacks, 1 or 2 attacks. She has the haha attack, and she can spawn in like airplane guys. And you know, it's not terrible, but definitely harder than Goopy Legrande, so probably D. And now for the second and fourth phase, it's honestly pretty difficult when you really think about it, but like once you really understand the patterns, it's not too difficult. So probably C tier. Now the last phase is honestly kind of difficult. I can't even lie. Now once you, I don't know, man. The last phase is just honestly kind of hard. But like once you really understand the UFO's patterns and such, it's not like terribly terrible. So probably a B tier. Okay, next, the last boss of IL-1, Candy Carnation. Now the first phase, he really only has like 3 attacks. He can summon the plants, and he can summon that freaking boomerang, and he can summon acorns. But that's about it. Now, I think it's honestly, it's not like the easiest in the game, but it's definitely not the hardest. So probably D. Now the last phase, it's not too bad. Definitely not as easy. Definitely not as easy as the third phase, but it's still honestly, it's not that bad. Okay, now we're done with aisle 1. Now the next one is Baroness von Bon Bon. Now she has like 5 cupcake minions, and all of them aren't that difficult. Now let's rank them. All right, first up is the Jawbreaker. Now I used to have a hard time with this one, but like once you really get to understand it, like, and learn the tricks and such for this one, it is ungodly easy. So probably E tier. The Cupcake Minion, I used to think it was the easiest, but now that I've like played it a bit more, it honestly is kind of hard. So kind of difficult. So probably a D. All right, next is the Candy Corn. Now I always thought this was the hardest out of the bunch, but even then it's not that hard, so I'm probably gonna give it a C tier. Next is the Gumball Machine. Now this one is one of the easiest in my opinion. All he really does is just summon out gumballs and you have to dodge them, and that's really it. Definitely an E tier. Now last but not least is the Chocolate. Now he can trap you, like if you're in a really bad spot, but if you have Smoke Dash, this guy is a cakewalk. Get it? So probably D. Now, Baroness von Bon Bon's last phase, I actually found like quite difficult. It's like impossible to hit her when you're like constantly have to dodge her head. Well, not if you're using like Chase or Crack Shot, of course, but I honestly think this phase is honestly kind of difficult. Honestly, is it harder than Hildeberg? Absolutely, in my opinion. Okay, next is Beppy the Clown. Now, Beppy the Clown, I always found this boss like not that difficult. A lot of people think he's really hard. He's really hard, but I don't think he's that bad, in my opinion. Or at least some people say that. Now, his first phase obviously is ungodly easy, but definitely not as easy as the Root Pack, so probably... Is it easier than the Cupcake Minions? Honestly, no. Alright, the second phase, honestly, it's probably the second hardest phase out of the bunch, so, like, you have to constantly dodge the dogs and hit them. I honestly think this phase is kind of difficult, so probably a B tier. Next is... let's just call it the Charlie Horse phase. Now, this phase I always found the easiest. Well, actually, the second easiest. This one's the easiest. But like, if you just stand under him and shoot him and watch out for the roller coaster, this phase is also a cakewalk. So probably a B tier. No, actually a D. Now, the last phase is probably the hardest out of the bunch. Mainly because of the penguins, because you have to like. You can either shoot the penguins or you can dodge the penguins. Baseballs. It can be kind of annoying to try to shoot them unless you're using Crack Shot or something like that. But I think this one is it an A tier? It's up there. I'm just gonna give it a very high B tier. Okay. Next is Jimmy the Great. Alright. First up is his first phase. Now, his first phase does like 3 attacks. Well, not 3 attacks, basically just 1 attack. And the hardest attack, in my opinion, is probably, I honestly think it's the gems, like when they fly out. But this phase isn't all that bad once you have some practice. Probably a D. Next is just looped again. Next is his second phase, which I honestly think it's harder than the first, but it's definitely not a C tier, so I'm just gonna put it there. Like, if you're really impatient, then this phase, then you can lose like almost all your health, so probably a D. Next is his third phase, which honestly was pretty hard when I first started out, like constantly dodging the plants and the ghosts. So, but like now it's not that bad, so probably a C. Should I move it like here? Okay, now is the Cuphead phase, which This phase is honestly pretty difficult. You have to like dodge the hat's bullets. You have to dodge Cuphead's bullets, or Jimmy the Great Cuphead, or I'll call him. Honestly, it's a B tier. Definitely harder than than Peppy the Clown's second phase. Now, last but not least is the last phase. Now, this isn't that like ungodly hard, but you know, like the pyramids can be weird sometimes. But once you understand it, this part isn't that bad. Probably a B. Definitely not as hard as. Is it harder than Beppy though? Nah. Alright. Next is the hardest boss in my opinion in Aisle 2. Is Grim Matchstick. I had this boss. It's really difficult. Alright. Let's start out with the first phase. Now this phase can honestly be a bit much sometimes, but like compared to the other phases, it's not that bad. Probably a C tier. Yeah, C tier seems right. Next is his second phase. Now, if you use something like Lobber, this fight's literally like an E. But like, if you don't use that weapon, then this fight can honestly be pretty difficult because of the fire's weird patterns. Well, probably I give it a solid B. I mean C. Just gotta put it in there. Next is his hardest phase, the three-headed dragon phase. This phase, oh my god, I hate this phase so much. It would be a crime to not put this at an S tier, dude. This boss had me like screaming, dude, like ripping my face off, dude. I swear. Alright, next is probably the second hardest boss in Aisle 2, Wally Warbles. Now, his first phase can be a bit much, like when you first start out, but like after a couple of tries and like you have some practice, this phase isn't that bad. I'd give it a solid C tier. Oh wait, I just realized, I think it's combined, so, and the second phase, it's the first and the second phase combined. And the second phase also isn't that bad. I'm still gonna put it there. Now, in my opinion, I think this is probably the hardest phase. I hate this phase so much. Genuinely. I can't express it. It's not an S tier. I'm probably gonna give it a solid A tier. Actually, I'm just gonna give it a high B. Next is his last phase, which also was pretty difficult. But, you know, not like ungodly like Grim Matchstick's last phase. So probably basically the same tier as Wally Warbles. I can't say it. Wally Warbles third phase. Alright, next is probably is a boss that is really hated because it's like super difficult. Rumor Honeybottoms. Alright, let's start off with the first phase. Now the first phase honestly isn't that bad once you really get to know it. But if you use a weapon, especially if you're using a weapon like Lobber and Spread, then this phase is honestly a cakewalk. But like if you use a different weapon, this phase can be even still, it's not that difficult. I'd give it a solid D. I don't know if it's harder than, yeah, it's harder. Just gonna set it like right there. Then we're gonna put the cupcake minions in the back. There you go. Alright. Anyway, Rumor Honeybottom's second phase. Now, I always thought this phase was the hardest, but now that I've done it a couple of times, well, when I first started out, I thought this was the hardest, but this isn't. It isn't that terrible, but I still think it's honestly pretty difficult. So probably like, I give it like a high B tier. Now next is her hardest phase. I hate this phase so much, like genuinely. But if you use Lobber, it's not all that terrible, but still, you have to keep jumping and dodging the fists. Is it an S tier though? I honestly think it's a high A tier. Not as hard as Grim Matchstick's third phase. Next is Captain Briny Beard. Well, I think this is combined with like basically almost all of her phases except the last one. Now, all the attacks aren't that hard to dodge, so probably like probably a C tier. I'll put it like probably in the middle here. Next is his last phase. Now, I honestly found this the most difficult phase because of like the weird fireball patterns and like, you know, the barrel, like it can hit you when you're dodging the laser, which can be annoying. So I'm gonna give this a high B tier. Now next is probably the second easiest boss in IO1. It's Sally Stage Play. Now a lot of people don't like this boss. I honestly think it's pretty cool, but we're not talking about how much I liked it. We're talking about how difficult it is. Now her first phase, it's not all that bad. She really only has like 4 attacks. Well, I mean, that's still a lot, honestly, but they're all really easy to dodge. So, probably a D tier. Just gonna, like... There we go. Alright, next is the second phase, which I always found the hardest, but even then, it's not that bad. I hate, like, the babies throwing the bottles and stuff, and the mouse attack. So, this phase is definitely harder than her first, so I'm going to give it a high C tier. Is it harder than Captain Briny Beard? Absolutely. Alright, next is her third phase, which I always found the easiest, because you can just literally stand under her and dodge her attacks. But, I mean, except for, like, the wave part, but, you know, this is it an E tier? Honestly, I don't know if it, like, probably not. Maybe. Honestly, yeah. I'm gonna give it a high E tier. Sorry, I just gotta fix that. Okay. Now we're on to her last phase, and honestly, it can be difficult to aim sometimes, but even then, it's not too hard to aim, except if you're using Crackshot or Chaser. Probably basically like the same tier. Actually, well, you have something more to dodge. Is it harder than her first phase? Probably not. I'm probably just gonna give it a D. Hold on, let me just. Up. Why do I hear breathing, dude? What the heck? Honestly, we won't. It's kind of hard to rank them by order to like keep track of everything. Alright, next we're on probably one of my favorite bosses in IO3. Well, I'm not sure if it's one of my favorites. I just like the boss a lot. Werner Werman. Alright, his first phase can be a bit much when you're first starting out, but honestly, his patterns aren't that bad. So probably a D tier. Definitely not as hard as Sally Stage Play. This is the easiest boss in IO1. Definitely harder than there. Okay. Now we're on to his second phase, which I always found the hardest. So definitely not a D. It can be a bit much, but like once you're like, if you're like calm and like really know what you're doing, then this phase is honestly not that bad. Probably a high C tier. Alright, next is, oh whoops, forgot to fix that. Next is his last phase, which honestly isn't that bad. When I started out, I thought this phase was gonna be like impossible, but no, this is the easiest phase. Not the easiest phase, but I mean like it's not that bad. I'm gonna give it a D, and I'll put it like probably like right there. Alright, next is, oh my god, I hate this boss. I have a love-hate relationship with this boss. Dr. Cal's robot. Now, Dr. Cal, we can all agree on this, is probably one of the hardest bosses in Cuphead. Well, honestly, probably one of the hardest. Definitely harder than, I think his first phase is like so freaking difficult. You need to have extreme precision. You have to like learn the strategies. It took me so much attempts to get through the first phase. Definitely harder than Dr. House then Grim Matchstick's third phase. I'm giving that an S. Now next is his second phase, which it's not that bad, but it still can be a bit much sometimes. So I'm probably gonna give it a high C. I don't think it's harder than those two, but alright. Next is his third phase, which no questions asked. I think it's honestly harder than his first phase, but it's really close. Alright, next is Calamaria, which some people say she's really easy. Sure, YouTuber. I'm going to put her. She has a lot of attacks for her first phase, which her first phase can be a bit much sometimes. So I'm probably gonna give it a B tier. I don't know if it's as hard as probably gonna give it a B. Now next is I think it's connected with her second phase too. Including her second phase isn't that terrible. Now next is her last phase, which I think this phase is like unbelievably unfair because like she can literally just freeze you in place and you can die. I'm not sure if it's an S, but I think it's a high A tier. Definitely hard. I don't know if it's as hard as Rumor Honey Bombs. It's really close. Now next is probably a boss that I didn't think was super duper difficult, but still can be pretty hard at times. Next is his first phase, which honestly, let's all be honest, it's the easiest phase. I'm gonna give it a D. Where should I put it? Let's put it like right there. Next is the skeleton train, which I always found this part kind of difficult. A lot of people probably won't agree with me on that one. Honestly, I think it's pretty hard. C tier. Now next is, a lot of people say, oh, it's probably like one of the hardest phases. Like, really? Is it though? All you have to do is damage him. It can be hard to damage him sometimes, but like that's really it. It's definitely not an E. I'm gonna give it a D. Probably a little bit higher than the first. Next, in my opinion, is his hardest phase, the train. Now this phase is a lot. Like you have to dodge the skeleton circle or whatever it's called. You have to dodge the fireball. You have to parry. The thing, the door, his tail to open the door. Honestly, I think this phase is it harder than Calamaria though? I'm giving it a B tier, but is it harder than Calamaria? Honestly, yeah. Now we're on to King Dice's minions. Alright, first up is Tipsy Troop. Now, with all three of these combined, it can be a bit much, but like, overall, this boss isn't that bad. Probably gonna give it, I don't know if it's as hard as a Candy Carnation, so probably a D. Next is Chip's Bed again. Now, if you have Smoke Charm, there's no challenge. Like, that's beyond it. It would be an F. I'm probably gonna give it an E tier though. Like, if you're not using the Smoke Charm, then this phase is kind of a bit much. But like, once you practice, it's not that bad. I don't know if it's as hard as Goopy Legrani though. All right, next is probably the easiest out of the three, Mr. Wheezy. His patterns are extremely predictable. Honestly, do I give it an F? No, I do not. But it is really close. Definitely easier than. Honestly, I'm gonna give it all the way at the bottom. Next is probably one of the hardest. No, it's not one of the hardest, but I think it's like the second hardest, especially because of the moving platforms, Pip and Dot. It's definitely not an E or a D. I think it's a solid C. I'll put it like there. Next is Hocus Pocus, which I always found kind of difficult sometimes. But if you have the Smoke Charm, it's not that bad. Probably a solid D. Probably harder than. Probably not actually. Okay, next is what's this one called? Fear Lap, I think. Fear Lap. Now Fear Lap, when I first started out, I thought he was like honestly probably one of the hardest, but now he's like extremely easy. So probably a D. I'll slightly harder than these two. Next is one of the easiest. It's not the easiest, it's one of the easiest. It's what's it called? Prowuletta. Now, if you have the smoke bottle charm, there's no challenge. Like, let's be honest. But yeah, you have to learn the patterns and stuff. Like, you have to learn how to like parry the chips and such. But even still, it's not that hard. Definitely harder than Mr. Wheezy, but like it's still. Next is the easiest boss in Cuphead. It's the 8-ball. Like, this is like below F. F minus, dude, I swear. Next is definitely the hardest out of the bunch. It is the monkey. Now, it can be hard to match the cards, and his attack, and like the way he moves can be like kind of hard. So honestly, a B tier. Definitely B. Next is the King Dice fight. Now, when you're a new player and you do this, it's probably gonna be like really difficult. Like once you understand it, this it's not that bad. I'll still give it a C though. I'll just put it like I guess right. Where is it? How do you freaking put it in, dude? Holy crap! Just move that. Definitely not as hard as Ruby Crack. Now is the devil, the one and only, the devil. Now, the first phase, honestly, it's kind of difficult, to be honest. Like, there's a bunch of attacks. I'm gonna give it a solid A tier. Okay. Next is his last couple phases. Now, the second phase isn't all that terrible once you really get to know it. And I think the third phase is the second hardest. Honestly, probably gonna give it an A tier too. Next is, now we're on to the DLC stuff. Now is Glumstone the Giant. I always found this to be like the easiest boss in Isle 4, or the DLC island, if you will. His first phase can be a bit much sometimes. I'll probably give it a solid, probably a C. Next is second phase, which I always found the hardest. So, probably a B. Definitely not as hard as a lot of these, but like a lot of these. Probably like there. Now his third phase, now it can be hard to aim on it sometimes, probably like the same tier, but definitely not as hard as the second. Now next is Moonshine Mob. Now Moonshine Mob, a lot of people say it's ungodly easy. I always found this boss like kind of difficult sometimes, especially his third phase. Now, first up we have the first phase of Moonshine Mob. Now, I always found this one not that bad, but it can be a bit much sometimes. So, overall, it's not that bad. I'm gonna give it a C. Next is the second phase, which I always found the hardest part about this phase is definitely like the music notes and such. So I'm definitely gonna give it. It's definitely harder than the first. So I'm probably gonna give it. I'm just gonna do it like a bit higher. Next is his third phase, which I always found the hardest. It can be really hard to aim sometimes, even if you're using like stuff like Chaser and stuff. It still takes a bit to beat this. I'm gonna give it a high B. I don't know if it's as hard as some of these. Probably B. Now next is his last phase, which it kind of really depends on what weapons you're using. If you use like certain weapons, it's like it can be kind of hard to hit him. But if you're using stuff like Crackshot, this phase is literally like I'm probably gonna give it an E. Now next is the Howling Aces, which I always found this boss honestly really, really difficult. First up is his first phase, which I always found it like not that terrible, but like when I first started out, I thought it was already tearing me up. I'm gonna give it a solid B though. Definitely harder than, well, actually not harder than a lot of these. Next is the second phase, which obviously it's the easiest, but it can be a bit much when you're first starting out with this boss. I'm gonna give it a solid D. But where, though? Probably right there. Next is obviously her hardest phase. It's the hardest phase when, like, it literally just flips your screen, and it inverts your controls, which I always found that really difficult. Definitely not as hard as, it's definitely not an S, but it is definitely an A. I'm not sure if it's as hard as some of these. Right there, I think that seems right. Now this is our secret phase. Now I've never done this phase, so I'm probably gonna give it. It probably, I heard it doesn't invert your screen, so I'll probably just give it a B. Next is Mortimer Freeze, which I always found this boss kind of difficult. A lot of people find him really easy, but he was kind of difficult for me. Next, alright, I don't know why I said next. Alright, his first phase is obviously the easiest out of the bunch. It's not an E. It's probably a D for me. Even like a high D, I guess. Alright, next is his hardest phase in my opinion. His second phase. The second phase, it's a lot. It's a lot. Like even still, I die to this phase or take damage. I'm gonna give it a high B. Next is his third phase, which it is pretty difficult. It's definitely not as hard as the second. I shouldn't say that. I feel like they're the same, in my opinion. Next is Esther Winchester, which I think this fight's pretty cool, but yet again, we're not talking about coolness, we're talking about how difficult they are. Alright, first phase. This phase can actually be a bit much sometimes. So honestly, can't believe I'm saying this, so it's probably a B. You know what? We're not going to rank them by order. We're just going to rank them. Alright. Next is the second phase, which also can be a bit much. But I don't know if it's an A tier, though. So definitely probably the same tier. Next is his third phase, which I always found also pretty difficult. Definitely not as hard. It's definitely harder than the first two. Well, I mean, probably it's easier than the first. Now, next is her last phase, which is honestly pretty difficult. Like, when I first started, I was genuinely wondering, like, how do I beat this? Definitely not an S, but it's an A. Next is one of the hardest bosses. Probably one of the hardest bosses I've ever done. Not one of, but, like, it's really hard. Alright, Chef Saltbaker's first phase. On it. Wait, where did it go? Bro, where did it go? We'll get to it. Alright. Well, when I find it, his first phase is gonna be an S tier because like of the weird patterns of like every freaking food item, if you know what I mean. Like everything about that phase is difficult. Like even like some of the like everything about it, I think it's really difficult. Oh, here it is. Okay, yeah, a solid S tier. And the second phase is also really difficult. I don't know if it's as hard as this. Honestly, it's still pretty difficult. Honestly, an S too. Next is his last phase. Third phase, which it's really easy once you really get to know it, but it still can be difficult when you first start out. Probably a B. Next is his last phase, which honestly, this is also really difficult. Like, honestly, it's also an S. Now, next is the secret devil and angel fight, which a lot of people say, oh, it's so easy, but I always found this one, like, honestly, kind of hard. Probably a B. There's not much to say about that. Next is all the, I forget what they're called. Let's just call them the parry dudes, because all of them require you to parry. Next to the pawns, which this one can be a bit much, but it's definitely not as hard as a lot of the bosses here. Probably an E. Next is the horse, which I always found really kind of difficult too. I don't know if it's not as hard as the pawns. Probably a D. Next is the bishop. I think it's what it's called. This one also is kind of difficult too. Definitely not as hard as the horse. So definitely probably a D. Next is the rook, which I always found the hardest of the bunch. So probably a C. Because like the way you have to parry the heads can be kind of annoying, and sometimes you miss your parries. Next is the queen, which is kind of anticlimactic because it's the last one. I feel like it's the same tier, but definitely not as hard as the rook. All right, now we're at the run and gun levels. All right, first up we have the first one, which obviously it's a lot when you first start out because you know it's you're first started, but it's probably an E. Next is the second level. Forest Folly. I don't remember the names. It's definitely not as easy as the first. It's slightly harder. D. All right, now we're on the aisle 2 running guns. All right, I'm just gonna call them aisle 2. Now the first aisle 2 level, it's honestly kind of difficult. It can be kind of difficult sometimes. So probably a C. Next is the second aisle 2 running gun, which I feel like it's the same tier. Next is the aisle 3 ones. Now, let's just call it fish, the water running gun. Now, the water running gun, honestly, it's definitely harder than these two, so I'm going to give it a B. Now, next is probably the hardest running gun level, in my opinion. It's the last running gun. Honestly, it can be a bit much. Definitely harder than the first aisle 3 one. So definitely a higher B. All right. I don't know why this is here. It's not really a boss, but I'll probably just give it the same tier. It's a guardian, I guess. Now we're at the last 3, the mausoleum. Now the first is probably an E. The second slightly harder. Still. Alright, the last one is a D. And there's nothing really to say about them. They're all you have to do is parry them. Alright. That's all the bosses. Now, alright, here are all the bosses in rank. Dr. Cow's third and first phase. They're just really hard. They have really weird patterns, and it takes a while to beat it. Alright, Grim Matchstick's third phase. There's nothing more to say. You know why. Now, Chef Soap Baker's first and second and third and fourth phase, all of them are really difficult. Now, I don't want to say all of them, so you guys can just look around and see them. Now, use the final tier list. Alright, thank you guys so much for tuning in the stream. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and that's it for this stream.